Hi, this is Mike Hughes. We are going to log into Infusionsoft and add a contact. So we're going to go to the Infusionsoft application, which is signin.infusionsoft.com. So again, signin.infusionsoft.com. Click on our application here. And it did not ask me for my username and password because I previously logged in, but typically you would be asked for your username and password. So you'll enter the information that I provided. Now, what we're going to do is add a contact. So to add a contact, there are two ways to do it. The system lets you add them manually using this little drop down and under contacts, but we don't do it that way. Instead, I've created a form, and so you just mouse over the star, click on this little plus. We have two different forms. The reason we use the forms instead of a manual entry is that these forms apply tags that are required for various follow-up sequences and so on. So it's super important to use the form rather than the manual entry, because if you use the manual entry, you won't be properly tagging the contact, and they'll probably get lost in the mix. So it's critical that we use a form. There are two forms. Basically, we have a general contact form and a new contact form. Underneath you see it says never met or spoke, and so this is a web lead. This is somebody maybe you met in an open house, so even though you've spoken with them, you really don't know them. So this is basically for people that you don't really know. And general contact form is somebody, this might be somebody in your sphere of influence, somebody that you have had contact with and you need to get them into the system. For anyone who's watching this and not familiar with Infusionsoft, basically Infusionsoft can be used in a number of ways. We use it as a contact management system, as well as a lead follow-up and to a certain extent project management system. So I'm going to click on General Form, and over here we have the form that is going to tag people appropriately. So this is going to tag the person according to who they belong to. And so in this case, the contact's going to belong to me. If Mary Beth, Leah, or Cindy were entering, they would enter their person. If our admin is entering a person, they would select Team Admin. And then what this does is it round robins the contact. So Mary Beth gets the next lead, Leah, Cindy, and then myself, and so on. So to make sure that the lead is properly assigned, I'm just going to select my name. That is an example of one of the tags that gets added. And now we're going to add the lead. Kind of messing it up here a little bit. I'm going to explain these fields in a second. Okay, so the other important thing about what this form does, these are the general fields in the contact record, but we've created these other fields. So letter salutation, so when the email's sent out, or a letter, or anything like that, it'll say Dear Patrick and Aaron, or the label salutation, so it would be Patrick and Aaron accordingly. So just for privacy reasons, I'm just going to put some bogus information here, and then we'll go in and update the record. I'll show you how to do that. Everything's going to fill in. Basically, you would put in the address information if you have it. If the person is calling as a result of some of the marketing that we've done through a property, you'd select the property. Again, this is an example of a tag. The note is always required, so it's best to date stamp everything so you know when and where people came from. So referred and this person's a buyer. Again, these are tags also. If this is just a close friend who would probably refer business to you, you'd say neither for now. Okay. In other words, they're not buying or selling at this point. If it's someone who has to buy and sell, obviously you'd select buyer-seller. This is the contact source, so we track everything just to make sure that we know what is working and what's not. I think everything's pretty self-explanatory here. This is a referral. Yeah, I would say everything's pretty self-explanatory here. And as far as the time frame, this is also important. It defaults to 1 to 2 months. I'm going to say 3 to 6 months for them. This is important because it's going to add a tag that will determine the call frequency. So if it's more than 12 months, they'll be called every 3 to 4 months. If it's less than 2 months, for example, though, they'd be called every week. Down here, if the person's an absentee owner, a developer, or an investor, you want to select that as well. Again, more tags, but it allows us to easily look in the system for developers when we have a piece of property that could be developed, or investors who may be interested in, for example, multifamily. You just click on Submit. There's no real feedback from the form. It just goes to a blank slate. That's designed to enable some efficiencies as far as quickness of the system. Let's go look at that contact. Okay, so there are a few ways you can look up the contact. Again, you can go to Contacts, and this will let you do a pretty granular search. You know, you can look by first name, starts with, contains, doesn't contain. You can search by email address, tags that they have, phone numbers, and so on. The search I like to use is up here in the top right, and you can search one of two ways. You can search by first name. All you have to do is type in the first name and then enter. And I'll show you all the Patricks, and you can see that we have Patrick right there. You can type in the name and then a star. If you remember, it begins with a C, but you can't really remember the name. Or, this is kind of odd that Infusionsoft does it this way, but let's say you cannot remember their first name, but you know their last name. You could just do a star, space, last name, and again, we'll pull up the contact's name. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that name. It'll bring me into the complete record. Now this is where I can update the information properly. So I might do like a 513. And again, I'm not going to update the information just because this is out in the public domain, but this is how you would update it. After making any updates, you always want to click on Save to make sure that the information's been saved. You can see the tags that have been added. So lead source is me, referral, buyer, transaction 3 to 6 months, calling every month based on this. Okay, so the call is automatically set up. A few other tasks. The admin is assigned some tasks. The user is assigned a follow-up call task with some tips on what to do. And the notes, person notes. Okay, so if you click on person notes, where we met. So this is where I put in referred by Kristen Field. Scheduled meeting for 3/17. Okay, at office. It's really important to take notes, date stamp everything. You know, we have so many people in the system that it becomes impossible really to know what you said to one person versus another, and it just kind of frees your mind of that clutter as well. Anyhow, this is how you update the record manually once somebody's in there. Salutation and Net Promoter Score, basically. Again, you can see how this carried through. If they're a buyer, once the transaction begins, we are able to just fill in this information here. This is used by some of the follow-up sequences that we use. If they were a seller on listing info, again, we basically just fill in this information, and it will help us manage the process and not miss any important dates. So that's how you enter, how you log into an Infusionsoft system, how you enter contacts into our system, and how you can manually update them once they're in the system.